Hey everyone, and welcome to this video, which is the first video in a playlist where we'll be learning to create a game inside of the Unreal Engine. Now we'll be creating this very simple game which is going to include a main menu screen, a game over screen, and 2 levels which will look something like this by the end of it. Now I just wanted to say first of all that this playlist will be heavily inspired by a playlist created by Brackeys, who is a Unity tutorial creator, and he's made a really great playlist of videos showing how to make a very similar thing or this thing inside of Unity. And I'd seen that, and it was a really good way to get to grips with most of the basics when you're first starting out creating a game. And also I just wanted to provide a kind of introductory level look at the comparison of how you would go about making something in Unity. If you wanted to find that out, then I will be linking the Brackeys playlist, and then likewise how you would go about doing the same thing inside of the Unreal Engine. So to begin with, if you're really new to this, then what we'll need to do is head over to the Unreal Engine website and download a version of the Epic Launcher, which can be done just here. Again, link for this will be in the description, and head over to the download button in the top right hand side of the screen. And if you haven't already, or if you're not signed in, then it will ask you to create an Epic account. These are completely free, so go ahead and do that. And you'll need that when you've installed the Epic Launcher. As you normally would, just run the executable and that will install everything that you need to get started. Okay, so you now have the Epic Launcher installed, and hopefully you've opened it and you'll have something that looks a little bit like this. So at the moment we're on the community page, and where we want to go is over to our library, which is this tab here. And when we select this, this will be where we can install a version of the engine to actually use. So at the moment I have 2 versions installed, which is the 4.17 and the 4.18 versions. If you don't already have one of these, then you get this drop down over here, or you can use the Add Versions button just up here at the top. If we click the Add Version, you get a drop down and you can choose the most up-to-date version to install. I would recommend going with 4.18 or the current recent version of the engine. When you've selected your version, just simply hit install. You'll get some options and a user agreement that you want to accept, and you'll get some options of where you set this, the location, the directory and everything. Choose those and then go ahead and hit the install button. Now this can take quite a while. They are some fairly large installs, but once you have that done, you'll have the buttons looking something like this. And you did get the option as well to install different modules to your engine build. If you didn't select the ones that you want now, not knowing what they include, that's fine. We can come back, we can use this drop down, go to options, and we can install things like the starter content, templates, which are very useful when you're learning the engine, and we can also update the target platform. So you may not need all of these right now. If you do in the future, then just remember, you can always come back and install these as and when you need them. With all of that out of the way though, we can now finally get into creating our first project. So we're going to hit the launch button. This is going to launch the version of the engine you've just installed. Again, this can take a bit of time depending on your system. And for this project, we're going to start this off as a blueprint project. You get 2 options. You can create a blueprint or a C++ project. We want blueprint for now. And these are the templates that I mentioned. So we can get different templates for different game types, which we already have some programming and blueprints ready for you to tear apart and work out how they're made. We're going to do this from scratch. We're going to create everything ourselves. So we're going to create a blank project. So with those 2 options selected, what we want to do is make sure we have no starter content included, maximum quality, and the desktop to console version will be fine. We want to make sure we have the correct directory. So for me, mine will be the D drive under the projects and my Unreal Engine 4 projects. And then we just want to give this a name. So I'm going to prefix this with YT for YouTube. And I'll call this something like, we'll call this Cube Runner, as we're going to have a game which is essentially just going to be our cube running forward endlessly. So with all of that done, we can hit the create button down here. And this will now create the version of the project. And again, this can take a little bit of time. The first thing is down here in the content browser. I like to press this small button in the top left-hand corner to separate the view so we can have our content folder, and then the filters for the assets and the content within that folder. Next, we want to add a few folders into the content folder. So if we right click on this and create new folder, the first thing I want is a folder for all of the assets that we create. And I'm going to create a folder for the blueprints that we'll be creating. And then finally, we're going to need to save a map, which is essentially a level. So we're going to right click again and create one new folder called maps. Now this is important because the first thing we have here, we actually loaded into a default map. So I'm going to press Ctrl S to save this. I'm going to go to our maps folder, and I'm going to name this one our, we'll call this main 1. So for this, we will be creating 2 levels. So we're just going to start off with the first level, which we'll call main 1, and we'll save that. Now the next thing with that done is we want to set this to be the first map which is loaded every time we restart the engine, because if you close this project down and come back in, it's going to give you a default map every time, and we don't want to keep changing that. So to do this, you should already have the project settings open at the top left-hand side of the screen. If you don't, then go to Edit and Project Settings, and that will take you just here. Now, all of this can be quite intimidating, so we're just going to go and hunt down the things that we want to change one step at a time, and that way you're going to learn how to navigate around the engine as and when you need to use things. So if we start by navigating down to our Maps and Modes option just here, we want to go over to the default maps. So you can see we have a template default, which is the one we loaded into, which is the one that's going to try and create from new every time that you start the engine otherwise. And we're just going to drop this down and we'll select the one that we've just saved, which will be main one. And we have two options here. We have editor startup map, so that the editor is what we're in right now. So when we reload our project, this will be the first map that we load. And we have game default map. Now game default map is the map which will be loaded once you have built the project, deployed it and started giving it to people. So this is the map that players will be seeing. So we don't really need to worry about this one right now, but just for consistency, we're going to drop this down and we'll change this to main one as well. So now whether we're in the editor or whether we build this and play this ourselves, we're going to be loading into the main one map. So the last few things we want to do, we can start fleshing out some of the level that we'll be creating with this. So if we go back to our assets folder, create one new folder in fact, and we'll call this materials. And we can actually take a look at how simple it is to create a material inside of the Unreal Engine. So if we begin by going into the materials folder, right click one more time and create a material. Now I'm going to call this one m_flat base. So this will be the base material that we'll be using for any flat shaded materials that we create in the future. So if that's done, we'll save that, and all of this is going to make sense as we go through. So if we double click to open this, the first thing we see is this is docked or just opened in a random point in the window. So we need to grab the tab and put this at the top of the screen. Now if you want to stop that from happening in all future windows that you open, which I personally do, we're going to go to the edit button again, and this time we're going to go to editor preferences. Under the editor preferences, we just want to go down to this option, the asset editor open location. We're going to drop this down and go to the main window. So now anytime that we double click or hit enter to open something, it will always dock itself up here in the main tab. So we can close that one to clean up the tab a little bit and go back to our m_flat base material. So in here, there are only really a few things that we need to worry ourselves with at the moment. We have our display view over here, which if you click into, left click, you can pan around the material, have a look at what this will look like from different angles and different lighting. We can pan with the right click and move around with the middle mouse button. And that's going to be the same buttons really whilst you're in the editor as well. So middle mouse, we can look around with the left click and right click. And if you Alt and left click, then you'll pan around the selected object or the point in the screen that you have selected. With an object selected in here as well, you can hit F to focus in on that and then perfectly pan around this to view this from different angles. Back to the material though, what we want to do is we want to give this a color. So a color is represented by three different values, red, blue and green. So we need a vector 3 and we want a scalar value of this. So we're going to hit V and left click, which will give us a vector 3, which will represent our red, blue and green, plus a final value, which will be able to represent the alpha. And we just want to plug this into our base color. Now, if we double click on this, we'll get a color picker and we can just drag this up to white so that we can see this is updating the color of the actual material that we have. So we now have a white material. Now with this node that we've just created selected, we're going to go over to the parameter name and we will call this color. And this is going to be used later when we flesh out and expand upon the material system, but just for the time being, I just want to make a very basic flat base material. So if that's done, we want three other values which we can edit on the fly. So these are called scalar values. And to get those, this time we're going to click on the background again, the graph. We're going to hold S this time and click 3 different times. So each of these are a scalar value, which is just a single float value. And we are going to plug them in order to the metallic, the specular, and the roughness. Depending on where you've plugged them in, we want to grab them. We're going to call the first one metallic, call the second one specular, and the third one we'll call roughness. Now, the great thing about doing this is that you'll notice that every time I finish something or plug something in, we have the material updating over here. So we actually need to wait for this to recompile the shaders and update the material itself. So that can take a little while. So if we hit apply, I'll show you now a quicker way to do this, and we'll save this, is we'll go back to our main window. We're going to take the material that we've just created. We'll right click on this, and we want this top option, which is to create a material instance. So I know that the floor that we'll be creating is going to be white, so I'm going to remove the instance part of that and the base part, and I'm just going to call this m_flat white. And in fact, I'm going to go back to the beginning of the name and I'll add an I just here for instance, so we have a material instance flat white. Now if we double click and open this, We'll see the layout is slightly different. We actually have the shader or the material over to the right hand side, and you'll see that all of the variables that we created over in our base material, the color, the metallic, the roughness, and the specular, are all just here. So now if we tick these and we start playing about with them, we can see that we actually get a live update rather than needing to wait for this to recompile. And that's the power of using material instances, which is just basically an instance of its parent material, is that most of the information is pre-compiled already, so we can actually make instantaneous updates, and we'll see live updates of this. So I'm going to make sure that this is a nice flat white color. And then we can also play about with things as well. Completely up to you how you want to make your game look, but you can add things like metallic values to this now. We can add some roughness to that metallic so we get a nice kind of polished metal, and we can add specularity. And some of these will cancel each other out, so you need to play about this. So if we turn those down and just add specularity, then we get that kind of plastic look. Now for me, I tend to like to keep things with a 0 metallic and specularity, so I'm just going to add 1 to the roughness and put everything else down to 0, so we get this nice kind of matte material at the end of this. So with that done, that is my white material ready for the floor. So we can just grab the material from here, we'll drop this onto the cube that already exists, and we should see this update at some point with a white material. And there we go. So we now have a white floor, which is ready for our player to interact with in the next video. Okay, so I'm going to leave this video here for today. Anything that I discuss in the videos, such as the location to download the engine, anything like that, I'll be leaving links for those in the description below, so do check out down below for some useful links to other things as well. If you've enjoyed the video, then I'd really appreciate leaving a like, and sharing the video with your friends is always going to be a help. If you'd like to be kept up to date with the latest content coming from the channel and see what we'll be doing in the next video, then don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Thank you guys for watching, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next video.